There it goes. All right. Hey, Travis, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's about 65 out here in Illinois, so I can't complain. I'll keep it.
Yep. Yeah, we're Montana. I think it's only gonna be 25 today, but blue skies, beautiful weather, sunny. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I was like, any weather in Montana, you can't beat.
Yeah, I mean, some people they're like, how do you handle the snow and the cold? And half of my career was in Michigan working as a police officer, and I did not like working in the cold and the snow.
No.
It just sucked. And then total transition to Arizona where I'm working in the heat. I actually, that not that that was fun in the middle of the day when it's 112 out at times, but I liked that better because I could still function. My fingers would work, all this stuff. I was not ice cold to the bones. So
Oh yeah. No, totally agree.
mm,
Now, are you from Michigan originally?
I am. That's where I was born and raised. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, I grew up there, working. Um, just came through small family, small town. And then, yeah, that's where I started my law enforcement career was in Michigan.
Michigan. Now, when did you start your law enforcement career?
1996.
1996.
Yep. So, yep, a while ago. Yeah, a while ago. Things are definitely different. Came up through the watching cops on Saturday nights and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't have no family or law enforcement or anything like that. I just actually, after my parents had been divorced, my mom and I were living in an apartment in this small town, and there was an officer that would come home for dinner, and I'd see his patrol car, and then we just started chatting it up, and ended up doing some ride-alongs. Got hooked immediately, interned with them, and yeah, I knew that's what I wanted to do for sure from after those conversations.
Nice. Now, what made you make the switch from Michigan to Arizona?
So, yeah, I mean, obviously a big step, but I worked for a very small agency in Michigan, a sheriff's department between Lansing and Grand Rapids area. And not that there was not large departments in um, Michigan. I mean, we had Grand Rapids, but they still weren't that big. I had no desire to work for Detroit. Didn't want to work for the troopers just because you get bounced around to different posts throughout the state. So I didn't want to do that. But I had always had this itch. I wanted to work big city stuff. I had been I actually in like 2004, 2005, I was almost through the process for Las Vegas Metro and I was going to go out there. I was all good to go. And then I get into a shooting in Michigan. And it was just, I don't know, it just didn't feel right, dropping. I was literally, my next stage was to go and get the conditional and get my medical in. So I was close, but just withdrew from that because everything that happened with the shooting. And then, but I never lost that desire. So, um, I honestly, people have asked me this. I think that, so I went to Mesa, Arizona, which was just outside of Phoenix. I
Yeah,
think,
I actually know someone that works at Mesa.
oh, really?
Works
Okay.
at Mesa.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to college together.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it is, I think they had sent around flyers all across the country. They were like one of the first agencies that were really doing the whole lateral thing, transfer from out of state. And, now it's so common. I mean, you can pretty
Oh
much
yeah.
go wherever you want. But I think I got that. So Mesa, Arizona, I'm like, hey, I'm going to check this out, and started doing my investigation, threw my hat in the ring, and ultimately got, offered employment. So picked up my family and moved across the country to Arizona. So, yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. No, I was gonna say I'm going to Sedona later this week. So
Mhm.
it'll be my first Arizona introduction. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
excited.
Okay. Yeah. Sedona will be beautiful this time of year. I'm actually driving there next weekend to go to visit family and stuff. But yeah, that's a funny thing. If you go to Arizona this time of year, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I have to live here. Well, just give it till like May and June, and let's see how you do with the heat. So, is it? I remember one of the funniest things was um, I go through the FTO process, get out of that, you just get pushed, put wherever because you're in the middle of like a shift bid, so you can't even bid for shifts.
Right.
And I'm out doing traffic control, and it honestly was not that hot of a day. And I looked down, and I came from Michigan where we we polished our brass, our boots were shined every day, all that stuff. And I looked down and my Danner Arcadias, my polish is melting off going down the side of my boots. I'm like, what in the hell is happening right now? But it's just funny because that blacktop gets so hot. But that was my like, oh shit, I guess it does get hot out here.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that
mhm.
dry heat makes a difference too.
And it does, especially like in the winter. It's amazing how 30 degrees can feel so cold because it's extremely dry.
Mhm.
Um, and it does help. Yeah. I mean, if you have a pool and stuff, like it's 100, 105, like you're out in your pool, it is amazing. Like it is a good day, but it just gets intense in the summer for sure.
For sure. For sure. So now, how long were you with Mesa PD?
So I got there in 2008 and retired in 2022. So
Okay.
retired post traumatic stress injury retirement. Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So
Yep.
then with that, and I know too, obviously you were SWAT,
Mhm.
promoted sergeant, right? Retired as sergeant.
Yeah, I did. I was a sergeant in Michigan. I promoted in Michigan, and then yeah, when I got to Arizona, I mean, I don't think I had a plan, but I definitely wanted to become at least a sergeant again. Um, so yeah, I ultimately promoted. At that time I was full time. Our SWAT team, just a few months after I made the team, we went full time because we were so busy, and so I left that and had to. Once you promote in Mesa, and I'm sure it's like this a lot of places, you have to leave your specialty for at least 1 year and go back to patrol and manage patrol shifts. So, which is a
Mhm.
good thing. It was good for me um, just keep up with what's going on in the street because at that point I think I had been on the team for 6 years, so away from patrol for 6 years. So yeah.
Nice to go back and get a little refresher.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, typically with our people, they'll get promoted. Yeah, it's like, okay, and maybe I can maybe think of one time where this guy was in investigations for years, then he got promoted, and there was an investigation spot open. They just put him in there. But otherwise, yeah, everyone goes back to patrol, kind of
Mhm.
ground zero, and then
Yeah.
go to your next specialty unit if you so please.
Yeah, and there's always, like you mentioned that case, there's always these like, don't we have a policy that they're supposed to be on the street for a year, or they did 2 months on the street and now they're back to specialty? It's like, I mean, but you know how that goes in our organizations. It's for the needs of the department. They can pretty much change any policy and how it reads, like, oh, for
Mhm.
so yeah, that
There's
happens.
always the one exception.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Yep.
Awesome. So now, obviously, I have 7 years completed, so I'm in my 8th year,
Yeah.
with my department, and we're, like, the 2nd largest department in the state.
Yeah.
City's about 200,000 people. They're
Yep.
trying to get up to, I think, like, 360 officers by, like, 2026,
Okay.
and we're at, like, 320, I think. So
Okay.
we still got a little ways to go,
Yep.
but I've definitely seen my share of things over the
Oh yeah.
past 7 years,
Mm.
and I think people will compare obviously, if you have a more rural county, more smaller town, different things aren't going on where there's I mean, it's not Chicago where there's shootings every day,
Right.
but there's other fair share of shootings and bigger calls, things like that.
Yeah.
Um, has there been any that I shouldn't say any, but, right now I can think of 3 off the top of my head if someone were to ask me. And
Mhm.
I hate when people ask, "What's the craziest thing you've ever seen? What's the wildest thing you've ever seen?" I'm like, "Well, my version of wild and a more civilian version of wild are 2 completely different things."
Mhm. Yeah.
My standard has been raised, but,
Exactly.
you know
Yes. I mean, I think we all definitely have calls that stand out to us. And being in this realm that I am with mental health wellness, sometimes I think like the smaller agencies are almost like, well, Travis, I didn't have that big call, or this or that. But the difference is, number one, like even with a smaller agency, you're going to be going to some pretty horrific things. Also, like what I see here in Montana, people are more intimately connected to the people involved, especially, I mean, like smaller areas. Like when I worked in Michigan, I lived in the area that I patrolled. And so go to a suicide and like, yep, I know that 18-year-old kid that just blew his head off. And now I'm hearing his parents scream, and now I know them. I have to go talk to them, or get to a fatal car accident and you arrive on scene. You're like, holy shit, that looks like such and such a vehicle. And someone's dead in that car and you know them, or
yeah,
they're not well and you're trying to render care. So that is like, yeah, never minimize, I guess, like the call volume or what you're dealing with, because it's all some shit, you know.
Oh
And then
yeah.
also smaller organizations, they have a lot less access to maybe resources that we would, right? They just, and the culture's even stronger. Like in Montana, like this is like there's still some Wild West mentality of like, what do you mean mental health wellness? What is like this is you signed up for this, the whole culture that we're trying to get rid of, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, I have specific ones. Definitely some difficult times. I've saw way too many child deaths, way too many murder suicides. And then, yeah, I had a pretty significant call, like life changing in 2016. It was actually my first day as a sergeant in the training program when I promoted patrol. Yeah, we ended up rescuing a little girl I found her in a bag in a closet, that had been unfortunately abused sexually by people, and just a shitty, shitty day. Something you can't ever wrap your mind around. And that was kind of the catalyst that I did not take care of my shit, because I was part of the culture that said, suck it up. Saw things that were happening, but wouldn't come forward for help because I was scared. And would have thought of myself as a failure at that point. But until ultimately in 2021, it caught up with me because I didn't take care of it. So, yeah.
So even 5 years later, you're like, hey, like these, obviously it affected you that day in 2016, and then as it just kind of builds and builds and builds.
Yeah.
What can I ask you? Like, what did that look like for you? Like,
How
like seeing the sign, yeah, like seeing the signs of okay, this is getting worse. I need to address
it,
this.
Yeah, for sure. It's always easy, too, and it's especially as what I'm doing now in mental health wellness for first responders. I can definitely look in the rearview mirror and see changes from the beginning years of my working in this profession. Just how I viewed life, how I acknowledged people, how I dealt with people. I just read an article recently, and it says that law enforcement is one of the few professions that it literally can change a person's personality. We all change based on, I'm getting older or more mature or whatever. But I mean, you think about that statement, like a personality change, like who you were in the beginning, if you don't take care of yourself, can be gone. And that's, as I look back, like I was different, like I was happier and all this stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of build up to that I never went and got help for. The suicides, the deaths, the child stuff, my shooting, never sought assistance for that. But then, when 2016 hit with this call, I thought I would have given myself an A for like, okay, you can shove this shit away, compartmentalize, which I'm not advocating that. I'm saying don't do that. But I'm saying if you'd asked me then, like, yeah, I'm pretty good. Um, but when that hit, my cup didn't really have a lot of space at that point. And so immediately I did not handle calls the same. Like I specifically, I talk about this when I go around and do my seminars. Two murder suicides, fairly close together, with children involved. Shortly after I got out of the training program and got my own squad as a sergeant, handled my shit like I should at the call, and then went back in a corner of my car and just tears flowing. And all I'm thinking is like, what in the hell is wrong with me? Like that's literally those things. So, and again, because of our culture and how it is, who am I going to go say, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm crying. This just random emotions. And then also saw, yeah, I dealt with night terrors. Could not come down, or didn't like to let myself like relax, because when I would and I started having the thoughts in my head, I'm like, nope. So I, go back full speed. And I kind of had the perfect storm for that. I had my SWAT outlet. I could do the SWAT stuff and just stay running and gunning like nonstop. And that was tearing me up. Yeah, just real angry, which I now know is how depression can manifest itself, especially in with police officers. Like we're just pissed. Like how many times do you see senior officers and everyone's like, man, that dude's freaking ornery. He hates life. He hates everything. That was me, but I remember used to say that about people, but we were just kind of laughed it off because that was our culture. So
Yeah. No, and that's all even wild not even think about, but like you said, like I've definitely had my moments after calls, like, all right, go back to my car. I'm gonna have a 5 minute cry and then I'm gonna have to go to the next thing because it's
Yeah.
not like I can be like, time out, you know,
Yeah.
the city
Right.
can't fall apart right now because Ariana needs to cry. Like,
Yeah.
you gotta let it out. I like hearing that it almost like it hurts because that's the culture, not
Yeah.
you and I, but like that we've created in our career.
Yeah.
That,
No, it is. Yeah.
you see fucked up shit. Like
Mhm.
what it's that statistic where people like civilians will have maybe 1 to 4 traumatic incidents happen to them
Yep.
in our life, and like over a 20-year career, it's like 500.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The
You know,
range on that they say is like 200 to 700 critical incidents you'll see based on where you are, call volume, the special unit you work for. But yeah, so think of that. So the normal civilian, like 1 to 4, and and that can be difficult for them to process, right? Um,
absolutely.
Now you talk about what we deal with personally, but then also then we go out and we're handling everybody else's shit is crazy. And Aaron, you said something about that 5 minute cry. Um, I will tell you, like I failed as a supervisor, but that's one of the things. So for instance, especially when you're in an agency that has a lot of call volume, that the board is never empty until like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then as soon as sun starts coming up, it goes through the roof again. And that's how Mesa was. And we were always about, because again, we can get, this goes down a realm of leadership and like, oh shit, there's 20 calls holding on the board, what are we going to do, the city's falling apart, like
Yep.
calm down. Where it could have been like, hey, you just went to a rough call, everyone's on that, take yourself out of service, leave yourself out of service for the next 15 minutes, go do what you need to do to compose yourself, and then jump back on the board. And if you can't bring yourself to that point, just get a hold of me and let's talk. You know what I
Yep.
mean? What if we did that versus, man, I remember, you know and I wasn't so much, this wasn't my thinking, because I didn't give a shit, honestly, unless it was like hot calls, like whatever, that freaking barking dog can hold for 10 hours. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, the
Um,
excessive noise can wait.
yeah, but a lieutenant that, a couple lieutenants running the city and they see this board and they're like, oh shit, we got to empty the board. Everyone's freaking out, like, calm down. Let's take care of our people so they can function the rest of the shift instead of just like right back at it. You know what I mean? So those
Oh
are
yeah.
little things. That is a very good point. Like little things we can do as supervisors to help our people and to advocate for them and what they just had to deal with on that specific call.
Yeah, I mean, the one that sticks out for me for that at least was get a call for same thing, self-inflicted gunshot wound, found friend in the basement, and the address pops up, and I'm like, why do I know this address? I'm like, I
Mhm.
know it, and the notes are coming in, and I'm not far, I'm a few blocks away, and the name pops up, and I'm like, shit. It was
Mm.
the son actually of a coworker my mom has worked with for longer
Wow.
than I've been alive.
Yeah.
He and I would, it was like take your kid to work day. Like,
Mm.
he and I didn't stay friends growing up, but I still knew him and I knew his dad.
Yeah.
So I'm the first one there, and his dad's there, and I'm like, "Where's he at?" He's like, "In the basement." Okay, go down there. He's in the basement. He's gone. Like, all
Mm.
right, filling everybody in when they get there.
Yeah.
And the sergeant at the time, he's now lieutenant, but he's like, "Stone, I need you to do crime scene." Got it. Like without hesitation. Got it. Good. We're
Yeah.
golden. And then I'm standing in this doorway because he's in this room behind me, and I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like,
Mhm.
what? I'm like, but it was just instinct for me to be like, yep, whatever you need, Sarge.
Yeah.
And my coworker looks at me and I'm tearing up. He's like, "Are you good?" I'm like, "No." And he's like,
Mm.
"I got you." So I go to
Yeah.
my sergeant. I'm like, "Hey, I know the family." And he's like, "Well, why didn't you say anything?" I'm like, "I didn't even think about it. Like, it was just
Because
to
it's
me."
what we,
Yeah. I'm like, "It was another call. And if you needed me to do this, this is what I was going to do."
right.
And I would have dealt with it later. And he's
Mhm.
like, "Go."
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm teary. I'm thinking, and I'm trying not to like draw attention to myself leaving,
Mhm.
because then in my brain, I'm thinking, why can't I hold it together? Because my mom's coworker just lost a son,
Yeah.
and I'm the one getting emotional and choked up and have to leave a scene when he just lost his kid. So that
Mhm.
was that was a lot to process
Yeah.
for me at that time. And I went back the next day and I like apologized. I was like,
Mm.
I'm so sorry that I've known you most of my life and I couldn't keep it together. And he's like, no, I get it. Like, there's no ill will, there's nothing, but that still sticks with me to this day. And that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Yep. But yeah,
yeah.
people need to understand, they need to hear stories like that and understand like that is a normal human reaction. You have this connection. Like, yep, I didn't intend for these emotions to come up, but they did. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's just sit with that for a second and feel what that looks like. But you going up like, yep, I got it. Cause that's what we do. Right. Or we say like, hey, you good? Yep, I'm good. And you're off to the next call. And we do these blanket robotic things, just keep going. And sometimes that's where the shit gets missed of,
Mhm.
dealing with some of the stuff that we have to go through.
You're right. Yeah, and it was just an instant like, "Yep, whatever you need, we're on a scene. Whatever plug whatever hole needs to be filled. I'm here."
Yeah.
And yeah, and other coworkers, because I, went 42 over the air, and people are like, "And you've been at work for 3 hours. Why are you leaving?" And so I'm
Mm,
like, "It's fine. I'm good." And then the people that were there reached out the next day and made sure I was all right, which was great. And I went to work, but next day met up with the dad and was like, "Sorry." We had a little chat.
yeah.
If he needed anything, and then just business from there. But yeah, it was being on a call in the moment. Like, it's still quote unquote an active scene, but
Mhm.
then you're also doing a lot of waiting because you're talking to family, you're waiting for the coroner, doing all the things. But that, I'm not like, hey, this is a shooting and I don't know who this is and I got to bow out.
Yeah.
Like, and so that one was a tough one. That was the first time I've ever had to leave. Well, that's the only time really I've had to leave a scene, like, due
Mhm.
to being like, I can't do this right now.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's okay. We have to make that normalize that. Like, hey, yeah, could a supervisor say, "I need you to hold for just a second. Let me get someone." Like, if you can't leave that post, and I'm going to get you someone, I promise. And that kind of attitude, and hopefully, like, yeah, I mean that supervisor, they made a good call. Hopefully, people see that and say, like, yep, they were okay with it, and she's not being penalized for it. I just recently there was an incident in our area where unfortunately, a juvenile had died, and one of the biggest things that everyone was having a difficult time was because the family was on scene. So managing that, like the family and everyone will say like you could when a mother loses a child, you will never. Not a scream that can duplicate that. It's just that horror that you would feel for that child being gone. Um, so that's a whole nother thing where, I mean, it brings out some anger in me just because people think we have to be robotic. I'm like, yeah, just shrug it off. Like, it's what you signed up for. Like, really? I
Yeah.
mean, no, we're human beings first, plain and simple. Like, we're out here trying to do a job and, help our communities, but we're still human beings are going to have those human emotions.
Yeah. And I can say, at least for myself, that, you know, not to be morbid, but like, you get used to seeing dead bodies. Like, it
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
children completely different. But
Right. Yep.
adults, older people, you get used to it. For me, it's always been the struggle of like being around the family, because
Mm,
it's an emotional, and then it's hard for you to not be like, well, what if this was my mom? Or what
mhm.
if this was my sibling or my friend? Because
Yeah.
then you feel for him.
Right.
It Dealing with people's emotions has always been harder than,
Mhm.
'cause I can be like, all right, that person's gone. I don't have to keep looking at them until the coroner gets here. But, having to console the family, call whatever resources, doing all that stuff, it's hard. And that
Yeah.
never gets easy.
It doesn't. And that's another thing you say about where smaller agencies, they don't have what I said, they don't have as many resources because I was just talking to some people in this area. And of course, small, they don't have a lot of resources. I said, hey, have you guys ever thought about forming some sort of volunteer group that when you have a scene like that, they can respond and be with the family? So you're not having to manage that because we do have a job to do, right? We have to process the scene. We have to do all our stuff that we got to do. And I had that luxury in Mesa and like the Phoenix area, major city PDs, and they had crews that would come out and manage that for us. And that was so helpful because, yeah, even down to the thing, like, I don't even want to hear it. Like, I need to get my head straight and handle the scene and process it and make sure we're doing everything we can on that end. But getting those, and this sounds really bad, but it's just the only word, the distraction of having to manage that part of the scene as well is huge. And I think you could do that in smaller communities. Like, have a team that's willing to come out. I don't care who it is, but yeah, put them through some training and whatever, grief counseling. I don't know, something, grief counseling training that they can sit with the victims and take that away from the police officers and the other first responders on scene.
Absolutely. And we've got like a chaplain program. So some people will know that, hey, Father so and so, I
Yeah,
know works with you guys, or can we call them? Absolutely. We'll try to call him. Otherwise, we have just we call them victim services. So they'll be the ones to respond. You're like, I don't know what funeral home I'm gonna use. I don't know what, but they're the ones to sit down with you
good.
and we can help you through it. And then some people are like, I don't want some stranger telling giving me options about where I'm gonna go, like lay my husband. I'm like, I get it. It's just you can refuse it, but it's just an option. But it
Yep.
is great that we have those.
Mhm.
And I'm actually in our so we have a newer unit. It's about 3 years old. It's the crisis intervention unit. So we do a lot of mental health, strictly mostly mental health. And so we'll follow up mental health reports. People, involuntarily went to the hospital voluntarily. If it's just something that was even documented that they're like, hey, you should probably pay a visit to them.
Mhm.
And then right now we have 3 social workers that work with us too.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we had a. I mean, it was fairly new. I mean, I wouldn't few years, I don't know, but a unit like that in at Mesa PD where they did all the follow up. They tried to prevent additional calls. Like if they saw we handled someone on patrol one night, they're going through those reports for whatever that code is assigned to it, so it kicks to them, and then they would view like, okay, can we do follow up on this? Is everything being done that should be? So those are good.
yeah, no, and it's definitely been beneficial too. Because even since I've only been in there 4 months, because I was an FTO before, did that for
Mhm.
3 years. So I was on the street all before coming into here, and it's a lot of behind the scenes, even doing, like judicial petitions, going to a judge and having someone having to go to the hospital, firearms restraining orders. That's a
Oh, I can't
whole
imagine.
to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but just it's interesting to see how much there is that you can try to help people, but then
Mhm.
also realizing you can also only do so much.
Right.
Even in this profession, it's like you can do so much to help people, but at the same time, they also have to help themselves.
Yeah, they
And
have to.
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes it's the way it goes.
Mhm. Yep, it is, unfortunately. Yeah.
It is. So now, when you started My Arena, was this while you were still employed with Mesa, or was this post retirement?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I go through, I mean, I was not good. My last day of work was on a Monday in March of 2021. Well, actually, I went to work the next day, ended up going home and never returning. But um, my team had got called out on hostage rescue, and we had the call was that a little girl had escaped her home. She had already been shot, badly beaten by her father, and she ran to the neighbor's house and said, "Yeah, and my dad is still in there with mom and sister, 18-year-old sister." Ultimately, we get there. We went in pretty quick just because he had already committed violence, and we didn't want him to keep going. And we thought we were going to save everyone. We found everyone dead, and that was it for me. I didn't even know why that was so hard, but talking to a lot of seasoned operators and military people that I now understand, and plus countless hours of therapy with me, when you kind of get hyper focused, like, yes, I'm going in to save right now. I had not properly prepared myself for what if we don't. But when I went in and found it to be a recovery rather than a rescue, that was very difficult. So that was kind of the ends thing, and ended up being in therapy and out of work for almost a year before I finally retired. But um, when I retired, my full intention was Emily and I, my wife, had bought 14 acres up here in the hills of the mountains of Montana. I was going to come up here. I had a construction job lined up, and I was kind of just going to get the hell away from everything. I was in a really good place. I'd been through, my therapy consisted of 2 times per week, a lot of stuff. I mean, just pretty intense. I was in a really good place, but yet I wanted to get away from the city. I wanted to get away from all the noise, all the stuff. So um, I actually was driving up with a trailer behind me full of half of our shit from our house, and my wife's behind with her dad in a U-Haul. So I'm in the car by myself, and a buddy of mine through the national SWAT community, the NTOA, National Tactical Officers Association. We knew each other for about 10 years at this point. he had worked in the eastern part of Washington for most of his career, and then he came to Montana to be an undersheriff for a friend of his. And so he was doing SWAT stuff here in Montana. And he said, "We're doing a tactical leadership conference up here. Can you come up and do like a debrief from one of your hostage rescues or something?" And I said, "Yeah, man, I can. Yes, we have tons of shit I could show you and do these debriefs." Hung up the phone, then I'm driving. Your mind, when you're by yourself, just open road, like your mind does a lot. And I'm like, "Hey, what if I call him back and say, scrub the debrief, let me talk to you about my career and talk to you about lessons learned, like don't be Travis," pretty much is what I could have named it at that point. Don't be me. And he said, "Yeah, man, let's try it." He said, "I don't know how that's going to go over, but like, why not?" And so I did it. Very watered down version of what I do now. I've, professional presentations now and stuff, but it went over pretty well. And kind of got my foot in the door with Montana. I all of a sudden had some Montana agencies like, "Hey, we think we maybe want you to come talk to our people." And then the national SWAT community at their conference, NTOA conference every year, they asked me to come. So that was going to be the fall. This was March of 2022. And then someone in that audience is friends with, he lives in the Kalispell area. It's Andy Stump. He's a former SEAL Team 6 guy, has a nationally syndicated podcast. He's been on Rogan, every famous podcast you can pretty much think of. And they got a hold of him and said, "Hey, you need to have this dude on your podcast." And so he trusted this person enough to get a hold of me. He's like, "Yeah, man, let's do it." And I was like, "What the fuck? Like me? Like why?" And at this point, honestly, I was not a big podcaster. Like I knew all these podcasts. I honestly didn't even know who he was at the time. But I'm like, okay. And then I'm starting to do all this research and I'm feeling extremely overwhelmed. Like he has heavy hitters on there. Who the fuck am I to be on this? But I got on there, and that was huge as far as the national scene, because I had from that people reaching out to me, quite frankly, from all over the world, Australia, Canada, all over the United States. Like, holy shit, man, I've never heard anybody talk about their stuff like this. Like this, you like sounded like me. Like this, I could have been my story. And then it just kind of snowballed. And now, yeah, like, I mean, we travel all over the country. I have, my therapist, my former therapist from Arizona, she travels the country with me when I step outside the state of Montana. And then I have two therapists that I just everything kind of happened just organically with everything that I'm doing. I was connected with these two different therapists, and I sat down with them, vetted them. They're culturally competent. They want to help first responders, and so they do my presentations with me in the state of Montana. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's it was never planned, and now here I am.
And here we are. See, but you're doing great shit. That's awesome. And especially like you said, even going on a certain podcast and then having it be international.
Right.
Um, you know, and even people, I don't want to say having the balls, but having the balls to even reach out to you and be
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
that's super similar to my story. Cause some people can be like, oh, well, I can kind of relate to that, but I went to this presentation and then move on with the rest of my life.
Yeah. And I commend people because, man, Ariana, I've had people lay out their soul, and it is awesome. I always, first of all, super proud of you that you had the courage to tell me these things. How can I help you? And then everyone is so very kind to me. They're always very thankful because I've had some, just, I call it a privilege to walk alongside people in many different places that are just struggling. They could just kind of need someone to, for lack of a better term, hold their hand as they take this step to go to therapy, to look into what EMDR is. And then they kind of almost like, "Okay, you're good, now go." But they're like, "Man, thank you. What can I do?" And all I tell them is, I said, I would ask in return, you be willing to tell one person, "You know what? I don't need you to do what I'm doing. I don't need you to go on podcasts. I don't need you to lay all your shit out, to whoever. But if you could tell one person your story, you quite honestly could save a life." And that's what I asked. So, yeah.
Yeah, because and that's the thing, you never know. It's the quote,
Hmm.
"You never know what someone's going through." And then
Hmm.
it's like you and I start to have a conversation, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I relate to this." Like, not even because of our, profession. It's
Yeah,
just certain
for
things
sure.
that you experience. And like you said, we deal with people like, you know, all the time that, civilians, they have their own traumatic experiences that then either what's ever happened to them results in a call to us, or
Yep.
just like you said, even not altering their personality, but just even possibly changing the brain chemistry
Sure.
and how they
Yeah.
are,
Yep.
potentially the rest of their life.
Yeah, and it's all there is science behind what happens with us on these traumatic calls. Science they cannot explain yet, but they do know that our brains are equipped to, when we deal with a traumatic experience, fight, flight, freeze, whatever you want to say. It is we would like it to see for you to process that event very quickly. It's stored. You're never going to forget it, but we're able to work through that, and it's not caught up in our frontal lobe, where every little trigger or thing associated with something about that call causes you to go back to that moment in time where you dealt with that. It's called a cognitive break. And some people have them at different times, some of them don't. Two people can go to the same exact call, and one person seemingly gets out of there and has cleared that appropriately, and the other person, they're just stuck. And that's normal. Like, that's where we have to get to this point. Like, it's not crazy to think we were going to have some rough days. Like, I look back now, I'm like, man, we were a bunch of assholes for your generation coming up and generations before me. Like, we've cost people their lives, quite honestly, Ariana. I mean, for the way our culture has said things about mental health wellness amongst first responders, it is tragic. But that's my main goal specifically, is like, to the individual. Like, I don't care if your organization has a negative culture, whatever. To the individual, I'm telling you, listen to me, follow some of the stuff that I say, do your own research. It is normal to have some calls that you just struggle with, and it's appropriate to seek assistance through a licensed therapist who is culturally competent in dealing with us as first responders.
Yeah, and I think you even hit it on the head too. Like if you and I go to a call, you're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, nothing crazy with, I'm
Yep.
good." Afterwards, and then I'm struggling. I think a lot of people think, well, the five other people that were on this call now, and I'm the
Hmm.
only one that's struggling. I shouldn't have to be struggling. Something's wrong with me. And then they're
Ex-
like, "All right, I'm gonna push it down because everyone else is fine, so I have to be fine."
yeah.
And I think for me, that will do. I mean, I did that. I would
Yeah.
do that,
Yep.
and that's when I started to notice that things weren't going well.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. And Greg, from the Overwatch, I think it was when I was at this past event last week in California, he said something about, you imagine, like, and this is a lack of understanding by a supervisor organization, but okay, we've handled the scene. All right, come on out, crew. Let's talk real quick because we're about ready to break and go on. And the supervisor says, "Hey, is everybody good?" And everyone's, real quick, like assessing, well, am I going to say I'm not good? And they're all, nope, boss, we're good. We're ready to go back to work. That's what everyone says.
Hmm.
It just is because of our culture. Mesa was notorious. Even my team, like, I will tell you, the culture of my team has changed because we were notorious for talking shit, unfortunately, about people that were coming forward because we didn't understand it. But Mesa, unfortunately, has a lot of officer involved shootings. The Phoenix area does. And, usually, because big city, you're usually going to have multiple officers shooting because you have backup with you most of the times. And, like, yeah, you'd have maybe three shooters. Two of them are doing just fine. They're ready to hop back to work. The other one's like, yeah, I'm not ready. Something's not sitting right. I'm not sleeping. Things are wrong at home now. And everyone's like, what the fuck's wrong with them? How dare them? The other two are fine. We can't do that. Everyone's cup is different. What they're dealing with, what's going on, what calls have they been on previously, what did they deal with in their childhood before they came to our profession. It
Yeah,
all is a part of what shapes us.
absolutely. And it's funny you say that because we were hiring so many people right now, but don't have enough FTOs. So some of them are like smaller group was like delayed, so they'd go spend time with other units,
Okay.
and they were with my unit for about like a 2 hour block, and we were talking about something with DCF related. Like I was giving him scenarios,
Mhm.
and he had a question specifically about DCFS. He's like, "Well, is DCFS going to take the kids?" And I'm like, "Well, no, not necessarily. Like, it kind of takes a lot in this situation. It would be that wouldn't happen."
Mhm.
And he's like, "Well, I grew up in the system, and this is what happened." I was like, "Ooh."
Ooh, yep.
Because like you said, so everyone's got different background. I have
Mm.
have never had any, aside from being law enforcement, have interaction with DCFS, where
Yeah.
that was his childhood.
Mm. Yeah.
And just knowing that, okay, well, something regarding a child or maybe a domestic situation or DCFS being involved is going to be harder for him to not handle. And it may not, but due to his upbringing, definitely could be. So
Yeah.
even taking into consideration, we think we know everyone's background. We don't know everyone's background. We don't know
We
what
don't,
everyone goes through.
you know how we are. Most of us in this profession, like, I mean, you just don't air a lot of your laundry out at work. You just don't. Even your closest friends, you're trying to like keep it quiet or whatever's going on, or we just don't do that. So, and again, um, you don't know what someone's going through. I had someone from it outside, never met this person before, and they came to me through messaging, and it was a kid. I say kid, early 20s, and he had been an officer for a couple years, and had been to even many domestic violence calls. Right, that's one of our. If I come on the shift and you tell me I got 5 DV calls tonight, I'd be like, "Yep, just another Sunday night." That's just what we do.
Hmm.
And well, he goes to a DV call and he does not do well with it. And he ends up going to his command staff. And the reason why is he grew up in a domestic violence home and watched his mom get the shit beat out of her by multiple different men that was in the house his whole upbringing. Well, something about that DV call reminded him of a scene from his own personal experience. He was having a hard time dealing with it. It had stirred up a bunch of shit, and he got condemned for that. They're like, "What the fuck? You can't handle a DV call? Like, how are you going to survive?" And so I had to encourage him, and like, he did go get some help. He's back, to work. But I'm like, holy shit, man. And again, because I was one of the ignorant people, but there's so much stuff out there now. We have to not be ignorant, like, especially in leadership. Like, we know what's going on here and we need to discuss it and educate ourselves. But that's a perfect example of like, you don't know what someone has been through. You don't know where they came from.
Right. And well, and even what that video a few weeks ago when everyone's making memes about the officer that had the acorn fall on him.
I know. I
And
know.
and again, I'm like, I don't even know the full background, but the first thing I thought of, I was like, he might be a veteran that did a few tours. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're hyper vigilant and we're
Mhm.
back there. And I never looked back or looked more into that. So I could
Yeah.
be speaking out of turn. But it then turns into a meme. Now,
Mm.
obviously, he needs to, handle whatever he has going on now. But
Yeah.
people are so quick to make memes about it and jokes. And I'm like, that guy actually thought that he was getting shot at.
Right. Yeah. No,
Uh,
I agree with you, Aaron. I've been, yeah, obviously, my wife was a cop for 16 years too, and we watch this. I'm like, holy shit. But right away, I'm like, what? There's something's not clicking on all
right.
cylinders there, right? Um, and so, like, and I say this with anything. I don't care if it's like an officer being, you see, charged nationally, use of force, whatever, something's wrong. I always like, okay, I need to know the backstory here. Like, I need all the facts. But yeah, I feel bad about that. I actually had a specific example. It was very interesting because we're horrible in our community of just as soon as we see another officer do something mistake oriented, whatever, we're like pouncing, like, let's destroy them, let's eat them up.
Yep. Monday morning quarterback all day.
And I was literally speaking at the New York State Police Academy for a bunch of different people within this New York State Police. And right at the end, I see like a little bit of commotion in the back. Someone's coming in, they're like in somebody's ear, and like 3 or 4 people take off. And I'm like, oh, that was interesting. I didn't know. I figured something had happened. As soon as I'm done, people come up, they said, yeah, we just had a trooper shot not too far from here. And he ended up surviving. He was good to go. But there was a question on some national group. They post something within, like, we weren't even 24 hours into this, about, because I think he approached on the driver's side instead of the passenger side. And this group is always like, you have to always blah, blah, blah. I hate the word always, because like something may dictate that I most of the time go passenger side. Yeah. However, there's times that I did go driver's side, but they were just criticizing. I'm like, I actually contacted the organization. I said, hey man, just hear me out. From this dude is still in the hospital. Like, he hasn't even left. He knows, he's already questioning, I'm sure. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? Could I have done something different to not be lying in this hospital bed? And now you're going to use that critique. Well, I'm just trying to keep cops alive. Like, simmer down, man, for a little bit. We can talk about all tactics at an appropriate time, right? But just this pouncing and the way we do it to each other, oh, it's disgusting at times.
I know, I agree, and like you said, you're like, I was ignorant to it too. Like,
Hmm.
before I actually experienced, like, what
Yeah,
anxiety is, like,
right.
people would be like, "Oh, I'm anxious or I'm worked up," and I'm like, "Alright, like, you're worked up and it's nerves, like, I don't know, you'll get over it." And then
Yeah.
when I started feeling it and heavy and on a more consistent basis, and I'm
Mhm.
talking to my girlfriend Tara about how I'm feeling, she's like, "That's anxiety." I'm like, "This is anxiety?" I'm like, "This
Yeah.
blows, like, what the fuck?"
Mm.
And so then, now that I can actually empathize, I'm like, I
Yes.
get it. But no, I was definitely that person that was, and I was raised the same way. Not that my mom was, suck it up and rub some dirt in it, but it was definitely like, okay, handle your shit. You
Yeah.
know, we can, you can feel your things, but we got to keep moving.
Right.
So, but having that all sink in and then realize, man, I was probably a dick, but it was, but I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know. And that was my ignorance. And I can fully admit that. I hate it, but I can
Right.
fully admit that.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I just need, as far as I believe leadership should be able to take ownership. It's okay to say, "Yep, we've messed this thing up." Like when I do my presentation at the end, I'm talking about how we can change. I think our organizations need to educate the community further because we need additional money to help us with our mental health wellness and keep going. And some of that's okay to get up and say, "Yeah, as a profession, we have failed. We did not take mental health wellness serious enough, and these are the mistakes we made, but now we realize it and we're going to go a different road. But to do that, we're going to need additional funding to help our people, provide them the services that they need, because and then selling it from the standpoint, because I have sworn to protect this community as the chief of police or sheriff, and I want to put the best possible product in my people out to the community. So I need to make sure that they're, still good to go. Yes, it's going to be, you don't get out of this career unscathed. I mean, you're coming
No.
out with scars no matter what, right? But I believe if we change the landscape and how we look at all this, we can have much healthier first responders, and then they can go off into retirement and be okay. That's what I
Yep.
want. Yeah.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And like you said, I think it just like you, me, whoever, but whoever is willing to speak up about it. And it's not, like taking a stand to be like everyone, all this culture blows. Like that's not it, but there are certain parts of it that do,
Yeah,
or
for
even
sure.
just critiques. It's like
Mhm.
I would get shit for being a female. I would get
Oh,
shit for being young because I got hired when I was 22.
yeah,
Like, and absolutely being young, like no very minimal life experience at that time.
right.
And as, 7, 8 years later, coming up on life experience, I'm like, shit. I'm like, I'd be like 50 years old with all this life experience now. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, no, it's crazy. And like you said, we're like our own worst enemies.
Mm, very much so. Yeah,
Mhm.
you gotta change.
I know. I know. But police officers don't like change.
I know, it takes time. I'm looking at it like at a 10-year map. Okay, maybe 10 years from now, things will look vastly different. That's what I'm hoping, so,
Yeah, here's my 10-year plan and here's where I hope to be.
yeah.
Absolutely. And my other question for even with my arena, what made you pick that name?
Yeah, great question. So my therapist, who Jennifer Cooper, who she is brilliant, like just very passionate about helping us. She's former probation officer. Her dad was a U.S. Marshal. Um, all this stuff. So she's very passionate about what we do. She knew one of the biggest hurdles that I was going to have to get over is I felt I was ashamed because I'm supposed to be Mr. Tough, SWAT team leader. This is what I do. We just keep going. Give me another hard mission, all this stuff. And now I had just said, agreed with her. Yeah, I can't come back to work right now. That was the hardest thing because then I already at this point heard all the shit talking. People are like, oh, what the fuck? Gribble can't handle a call and all this. I mean, just what our culture does, right? Even up to, command level stuff. I mean, none of that stuff stays secret. It gets back to us somehow, one way or
Oh
another,
yeah.
right? And so she created for myself, and then she invited two other people, and now it's become regular stuff. What she does, a meditation night, and it's all focused around the Theodore Roosevelt speech. It's actually called Citizens and Republic, but it's coined the Man in the Arena speech. and specifically talking about pretty much fuck the critic. They don't know anything about your arena. They have not walked in your steps. They have not dealt with you have dealt with. And we did this meditation event, and it literally, Ariana, was like a mind shift for me. I was like, I walked out of there that night, processing still. But over, I think, yeah, we did it on a Friday night, and throughout the weekend, I just kind of gained this confidence of it's okay that I've got some shit to deal with. Like, again, I would almost like at times have this attitude like, you want to challenge me, you want to lay down careers, like let's talk, because
Yeah.
I know what I've fucking been through, and that's okay that I've had to take a time out. I personally messed up because I didn't deal with my shit. I put my career, my advancement, my SWAT team, all of it in front of my own personal health and safety. And so I failed at that. But yeah, that's where my arena came from. I was like, yep. When I decided, like, hey, I need to do something here, I'm going to create this organization. It was natural what I was going to do. So, yep.
No, I love that. And
Mhm.
I think even before, because you hear things and you're like, "Oh, this is how I would interpret it," or like whatever artist, or you hear song lyrics, and you're like, "This is how I took it." And then you hear an interview about an artist being like, "Well, it actually means this." And I was like, complete opposite, or just a different interpretation. But no,
Yep.
that's when I thought my arena, I'm like, okay, like here's me in an arena and all the shit that's been thrown at me for the past however many years. And how I've
Totally.
been handling it or hitting back or not hitting back and what's like knocked me down. That's what I
Right.
thought.
Yeah, and I do. I believe that we all, and you don't have to be a first responder. In life, you have your own arena. I don't know what you've come up through. I don't know what you deal with on a daily basis. Your arena, only you know that. And I especially try to preach that to people where the little girl that we rescued, her name was Ruby, and they'll send me messages like, "Man, I don't have a Ruby call." I'm like, I don't care. The cumulative part of what we deal with is really the big piece of the puzzle, right? And in fact, in the DSM-5, where they talk about all the different conditions, complex PTSD, one of the criteria is, or the things are, repetitive exposure to trauma. Who is that? That's us.
Hmm.
20 years of exposure to trauma. So if we are not prepared to deal with it appropriately, that shit's going to add up. I don't care what it is, call after call after call. And I think we have underestimated too. And the thing about the arena is like, um, we jump in and out of chaos 4+ shifts a week. And then we're supposed to come home and love on our children and love on our partner or spouse or whatever, extended families, and everything's supposed to just be okay. That is, man, we have underestimated what that looks like and how to deal with it. So we have to do this whole mind shift of how we approach it. And so again, I want people to stay alive. At the core of what we do, I'm tired of these fucking suicides. Like, for God's sakes, man. And that's happening because people they need to get rid of the pain. They don't know how to do it. They feel like they have no other hope, you know? And that is, I used to condemn people that committed suicide. I'm like, what the hell, you freaking piece of shit. How dare you do that? Now I understand it, because guess what? Suicide was an option for me. I was ready to go down that road because nothing else was working. Like, I can do this. I've been to suicides. I know what it means to, use this caliber or use that shotgun, whatever. Like, I know how to do it, and I know how I would do it, because I've seen it. There's no mystery to me. I'm not, am I, do I, I don't want to say scared. I'm not scared to death or anything like that. Like, I'm reckless, but like, death is not anything that I'm not, like you said, aware of. Show me another dead body. What do you want me to see? Like, you're gonna shock and awe me. Like, you see it so much, it just becomes like, yeah, that's normal.
Yeah. Now, you even saying that back right now, like that suicide, what caliber would I use? Would I use a shotgun? Would I use
Yeah.
this? Like this
Mhm.
caliber would actually blow my head off.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
even saying that now or thinking about that now and being in
Hmm.
the place that you're in,
Yeah.
like, are you just like that was a completely different Travis?
Totally. Because I was one number one. What are we trained to do? Solve problems, right? And I go out and solve everyone else's problems. I'm not succeeding right now in solving this problem. Before I found Jennifer Cooper, I had even tried getting assistance through EAP at work, and it was a fucking horrible experience. So I was done. with therapy. Thank God my wife, because she worked internet crimes against children, that was my connections with Jennifer. So she talked me into finally going. Um, but I didn't know what else to do. I was drinking way too much. That wasn't working. I was still having night terrors. I was still like rolling down the street and freaking some song comes on and I'm sobbing. Like, what in the hell's going on? Right. And so, yeah, that was an option, but it was completely different, Travis. That was when I was like, I've got to handle this on my own. Nobody is going to come and help me. And that was just an option. And that's a very common thought amongst first responders, which I'm saying, and if you don't have that thought, that's fine. But I'm saying, like, if you have had those thoughts, like, it's okay. Let's talk about it. It's not the death sentence. It doesn't mean you can't be a cop ever again. If
Mhm.
organizations are telling you that, they're fucking dead wrong, right? To have a suicidal ideation, a culturally competent therapist would like to talk. Okay, let's talk about why you're having it. Let's, make sure you're safe. Now, if we find you and you're sitting in your car and you're ready to act, like, of course we got to take extra precautions for that, right? But to have that passing thought, you'd be shocked how many people at my presentations, they'll come up on break or stay after, tears in their eyes, like, holy shit, man, I thought I was fucked up. I didn't know anybody else had those thoughts. Like, yeah, man, we have to normalize that conversation so people understand, like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, let's talk about how you got to this place, but and we can give you some assistance.
Yeah, and that yeah, intrusive thoughts, those are
Oh,
heavy,
heavy. Yes.
heavy. And again, like, people again, different experiences, different traumas,
Yep.
civilian, law enforcement, military, your intrusive like, and I don't want this is just my opinion, but
Yeah.
military, first responder, anything like that is your I would say your intrusive thoughts would be more frequent,
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
least my experience,
Yeah.
and just heavier all around because same thing, we have access to guns.
Hmm.
You see people shot, drug
Yep.
overdoses, whatever it may be, and
Yep.
most first responder suicides are by a firearm.
Right. Yeah. Because we know how to do it. I mean,
Mhm.
that's right. And I know, and yeah, this is the crazy. I mean, I've been to, suicide attempts where I'm like, what in the hell were you thinking? I've been to, so you learn how to do it. I remember a female one time back in Michigan. She was finally the one that called us. She had taken a 22 caliber rifle and had shot herself 3 times in the stomach, because a lot of females don't want to do anything on the face, right?
Yep.
And she's still up and standing, blood everywhere. But I know that caliber. I'm like, yeah, that caliber can be deadly, but can also just bounce around in there and hit absolutely nothing. So these are the things we deal with, right? Or I was just telling Emily this. I don't even know why this caught up, but I went to some call, a dude, he's called again. He had spent like 12 hours trying to cut himself in different places and he kept clotting up. And I'm like, you walk in there and you're almost like, dude, why would you do it this way? Like, but these are the things we have to understand, why this makes that option sometimes float through our head. If we're hurting, I know how to do it. This is how I've seen them all. I've seen the failures, I've seen the successes, right?
Yeah,
So,
or even if it's a fleeting thought, because how many times are you gonna see someone that's hung themselves or attempted to kill themselves, like, those are things that you now have in your brain, and you're like,
right.
"Huh, I wonder what
Yeah.
it would be like." Not even with
Mhm.
any intention, but you're like, there was a guy a few weeks ago, same thing, very determined to die, said he was gonna try to suffocate himself with helium, like, he had helium tanks, that didn't
Okay.
work, so he
Yeah.
slit his throat,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
something out of a horror movie, but he's still alive. Like, it's just great because that image is never gonna get out of my brain, and
Ever.
then
Yeah.
I'm like, "Is it because of the angle?" Like, and that probably sounds super bad, but I'm like, "Was it the angle that you missed and you just didn't bleed out?"
Right.
Or, you know
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we would have, for our team, for instance, we brought in actual trauma physicians to talk about what different calibers do to the body. So if we are getting into a shooting, understanding how to, stop the threat as soon as possible. So we learn this shit. And then you learn about the caliber, you learn what this does and that does. And it's just, so yeah, I was one of these people. I've had numerous guys tell me this, like, yep, really shitty day. And I'm coming home, plain clothes, whatever it is, or I'm in my locker and I take the gun out of the holster and the gun's in my hand. I'm just like, oh, I could make things end right now, this shitty day. And those fleeting thoughts, okay? But we'd like to talk to you. Like, why are you having those thoughts? Let's you probably got some stuff, unresolved shit. We can help you work through. So
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And I think what you're doing is fantastic
oh, thanks.
because, like, obviously you're going around the country now and being
Mm,
able to talk. And I even told you separately, I was like, I reached out to, my lieutenant who's in charge of all of our training and stuff to be like, hey, I was like, I've heard him speak. He's great. I'm like, he's actual law enforcement. Not saying
yeah.
that, we've had other people come in that weren't, or, is like one of the therapists with our EPA. I was like, but
Yeah.
it's different coming from someone who's been through
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So,
And I appreciate that, Aaron. It's still, I mean, Emily and I like I'm like, I can't believe all this shit's happening. Like we're coming to Michigan. We're going to be doing Michigan State Troopers. They're talking about an extended relationship, bunch of stuff in Ohio. And it's just, I don't like pull up on a Monday and be like, okay, I'm going to send out my shit to these 20 departments. It's all like what you're doing, the organic word of mouth, because I don't even know. I don't even really like selling myself. Now, when I do a proposal, do I send recommendations and stuff? Yeah, because they want to see that, which they should. They're vetting instructors, right?
right.
But I don't, like, I really like tell people, like, I really like you talk to someone that's heard me speak. I don't know how to explain it. I do think the fact that I got some years under my belt as law enforcement. I've done some shit. I don't come in there in a suit and tie. I'm pretty fucking casual. My mouth gets a little sideways sometimes, and I just tell you how it is. And then I really think the unique piece, because I didn't, I have, there are people going out telling their story, which I do want you to do that. But for me, if I'm going to do it in I guess like a training environment, I'm going to tell you what I went through from my perspective. But I'm not just going to say, because a lot of people come up and say, man, everything you're going through, I'm checking boxes. Like, yep, I'm right there. I feel this. I never heard anyone say this. Well, I'm not going to at the end of the presentation say, good luck. I'll see you later. And then we give them nothing. So that's why me having a therapist with me every stage of the way, and we kind of pass the baton back and forth. They're giving the clinical piece. We really get into depth of what PTSD looks like. We get into depth about different types of therapies specific for first responders and veterans that really help. And then I also, they're having that. And then now something that, Greg and I with Overwatch are really working on is that when I'm going to an area, I am going to try to have a culturally competent therapist, hopefully already vetted by the Overwatch in your area. So when we leave there, here's who you go see. Does that make sense? Because
Yep.
so we're trying to even get, and Greg's doing amazing things, but we need more. We need, I mean, like in January, went to Ohio in the Canton area, and that's cool. But the one person that they had was like 3.5 hours away. Well, thankfully, she was able to network me with some stuff in the Canton, Cleveland area. So I'm like, okay, here we go. This is how this is going to look in the future, because I cannot leave people and be like, I just showed you, you're probably dealing with some shit, and then just leave you high and dry, So I think that's something a little unique that we do.
No, and that's awesome because like you said, it's like I came here and gave you this presentation and I have some resources for you that are way down south. So
Yeah,
best of luck. Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, and I don't understand. Like, I'm going to talk to you like you and me sitting in the briefing room just shooting the shit. Like, I'm going to tell you what Travis, how he perceived everything and what it looked like to me. And then there's some technical things where the clinician is, I toss off the part of the presentation to them, and they're talking about, well, this is the clinical side, and this is why this was normal what Travis was experiencing. Let us tell you what's going on at this point. So
Yeah.
I think it's a unique piece, and I'm going to keep doing it because I think it's funny in Montana, when these people come to me at events, especially if it's anywhere near them, they literally within a few days have 4 or 5 new people coming to see them. And so they're slammed. And then like Jennifer, when she travels with me across the country, we have had multiple cities like talk to her about like, what's it look like to get you to move here and become licensed? And it's a little bit overwhelming, but I think it's because when you kind of go down this road, people almost describe it as like officers are like, okay, I'm drooling. I need help. I just heard Travis. I just heard this. Now get me help. I want to get better. and I understand that feeling. So there's just kind of this passion. Then people like, okay, I want to continue my career. I'm going to deal with some shit that I got going on. So
Yeah, and it's needed.
yeah,
100%. And just even everything you've just explained, it's clearly needed by the outreach, by, people being willing to come and talk to you after you present,
yeah,
wanting all the resources. Absolutely.
yeah.
You're doing great.
It's funny, you know how cops are. No one wants to raise their hand because we always have different times. Anyone have any questions? It's always just silent. But then
Mhm.
at break or at the end, we like have lines coming up to talk to us, and I'm like, and it's cool. I do. I mean, there is always benefit of like you being willing to share or ask some questions in front of people. But I get it. People are like, yeah, I need to have this little private conversation with you. But we welcome it all because I mean, at the core of it, we're just trying to help the individual, and then on top of that, changing organizations and how they're dealing with this stuff as well.
Yeah. Oh, you're doing good things. Makes me
Thanks.
happy. Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing is my Instagram. I have one just for this. It's called my_dot arena. And then I do have a website, myarenallc.com, and kind of gives our background, events coming up, just our story, things that, that we do. So, but the Instagram, like instant connection. And then I, I'd say to individuals, like I have yet to, I think I can say this, miss a message, I don't mind like once people reach out, like, hey, can I call you? Can I text you? I'm leaving space for that as my intention to where I can have these conversations with people and like just give them, the other day I had opportunity to go out with, someone in Montana and just take them out, have a chat, just some things they're going through. And I'm trying to do that. So I will connect with you, listen to you, give you advice, whatever people need.
No, it's awesome because it's not you're talking the talk and walking the walk.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah,
I'm
trying.
trying. It's all you can do, right?
Yep, exactly.
But before we end this episode, I've got a couple questions for you.
All right.
You ready for the first one?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
So, what is the song when you're in a bad headspace slump? What's the song to get you out of it, or to at least help you get out of it?
Oh, this is the one you were going to tell me about. This
Yep.
song. Man, I'm pretty heavy in my music. Like when I'm in a bad place, like so I like a lot of five finger death punch. And I
Typical cop answer. No, I'm just kidding.
no, I know it is right. But no, it is. There's a song I'm a little bit off today that I listen to. I've actually had multiple people reach out to me about that, and it's just I think it is because it's almost like a permission of like, yep, there's some days you're just fucking off. Like I don't have it all figured out. There's still shit that I deal with from my past, that my career, that some days just suck. But I push through it, and that I'll come down, get the workout going and just blast that song. And I'm like, yep, it's okay, Travis. It's okay to be a little bit off.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So, with all the guests, I'm putting a Spotify playlist together. So
Oh,
it'll
okay.
be
Right on.
compiled of, hey,
Yeah.
if it's something a little more heavy, more pop, whatever, more
Yeah.
folky, whatever
Mhm.
genre it might be, but I'm sure by the end of it, we'll probably hit about just every genre that's on there.
Yeah.
Um, the second one's a little heavier, but what is your purpose? Or what do you believe your purpose is?
Yeah. That has changed. I will tell you that. Cause if you had asked me this back when I was in the middle of my career doing all my SWAT stuff, been like, be the best SWAT operator I can be, I would have said that. Now I say my primary purpose is to be the best husband that I can be and be the best father that I can be to my two boys. And then obviously what I'm doing right now, my purpose is to do all I can to save another life. That's it. The basic core of what my arena is all about is helping one person be here tomorrow.
I love that. And you're doing it.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you.
doing it. All right, last one. So, what's
Okay.
a piece of advice that you would give to the listeners regarding any kind of, mental health, wellness, anything like that?
Yeah. The biggest thing, and obviously a lot of my stuff's just geared towards first responders, but I would tell you as the individual, I want you to be your biggest advocate. I want you to take care of yourself because at the end of the day, and this can go for civilian world, whatever the organization you work with. And a lot of times I know I was probably considered a company man. We're like, yep, Travis is all about the team, all about Mesa PD, no matter what. and that's good. I want you to be invested. I want you to look at this as a career and be professional for your organization. But at the end of the day, you are your biggest advocate and you have to take care of yourself, because sometimes no one else does, you know. You have to, right? So just that's my biggest advice. Take care of yourself and be your biggest advocate.
Absolutely, because like you said, you are sometimes the only person that you have. And if you
Yeah.
don't have you, who do you have? You have
For,
nothing.
yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Travis. I appreciate you coming on. It's been
Yeah.
great talking. This was great.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening to episode 5 with Travis Gribble. I gotta enter out of this thing. There we go.